YouTube test 1, 2.
Okay, folks, just to let you know, we are now live on YouTube.
Mark, in the chair statement, is there a typo where it says to submit written comment on these amendments prior to their consideration by the City Council on November 25th? Is that a typo? Is that supposed to say February?
Oh, sorry, yeah.
Okay, no problem. Just like you to know, I read your notes. So. Welcome to ERAC, Councillor Leeper.
Good morning. It's a pleasure to be here, Councillor.
Good morning.
Hello. Not too bad. You?
Jeff, nice to see you on Agricultural Affairs Committee, buddy. I haven't seen you since yesterday.
It's nice because, of course, I don't have to cycle to ERAC just from my living room. What are the locations for ERAC? You're at Center Point sometimes, right? Sorry, Erla, you're on mute.
Ben Franklin. So I am here actually today at Ben Franklin because it's better internet support here in Ben Franklin.
Yeah, and obviously that's a nice central location. But I think, do you move elsewhere through the city?
No, it's just Ben Franklin. We've been doing this for 6 years, Ben Franklin. Before we used to move around at least 4 meetings a year, but it takes too much staff time, setup, equipment rental, and we didn't see a lot of benefits from it. So.
No, absolutely.
Scott can talk a little bit about that. He has all the history of ERAC.
Not as old as I am, though.
It's true. No, the traveling roadshow of ERAC, it had to end after 2014. We had a situation where we had a meeting. Well, no, it was all the way out in it wasn't Carlsbad.
It was out there. East End.
It was out in the East End, but the closest file to the committee meeting was Roger Stevens Drive. Everything was west of Roger Stevens. It was all files in West Carleton and then files in Ward 21. And people drove out to Cumberland and said, you did this on purpose so that we couldn't come here. We couldn't come to the meeting. It was just, we were trying to do something that was positive, that was good, and it was backfiring on us. So we
actually the meeting was in Russell, if I remember correctly. It was this community center in Russell.
Yeah, I think you're right. Yeah, it was in the middle. It was It was on its own. It was a little building on its own.
Well, I can beat that at the start of just after amalgamation, when nobody but people from the old city of Ottawa who had their hands out to scoop up all the money from Nepean and Gloucester in particular, oodles of it, $61 million in reserves. Anyways, Rayner from Gloucester got it into his head that for two dumb things he did. First one was he said, we have to change the name of all of our townships, municipalities to Ottawa, which of course the Lowell Green world of those days erupted into total chaos. That was the one dumb thing. Then he said, you know what? We got to take this show on the road. The first show we took on the road was to Kinburn. Okay?
Oh yes, I remember.
Burn. I think it took, I guess it was in 2001.
2001.
Was it 2001 we did that?
Yeah.
Well, anyways, I think it took like Phil McNeely 2.5 hours to get there or something, okay? And the meetings back then were so long, and it was a nighttime meeting, that none of us got out till like almost midnight. They had, you wouldn't believe like the cost they had to set up like for a French translator. You're laughing, Chris, were you there? Because I'm telling you.
Chris Cope was there.
And so same thing, what was on the agenda in Kinburn, Ottawa Community Housing, Nepean Reserve Funds, and something else that was the homeless or something. And so the people in Kinburn are going, what are you doing here? Right? Oh God. And then, so
right.
that didn't last very long. Thank God.
Don Herwire is laughing because he remembered those days very well. So it's nice to see some gray hair around remember those things, because some, they were not even probably still in high school, like Counselor kids probably, or elementary school to that fact. Okay, so it is time for us to start our meeting. I see we're all here on the screen. Thank you very much, folks. Call this meeting to order for Agriculture and Rural Affairs Committee, Thursday, February 4th, 2021. Chair statement, republic hearing for OP and zoning items. This is a public meeting to consider the proposed comprehensive official plan and zoning bylaw amendments listed as item 3 on today's agenda. For the item just mentioned, only those who make oral submission today or written submission before the amendments are adopted may appeal the matter to the local planning appeal tribunal. In addition, the applicant may appeal the matter to the local planning tribunal appeal tribunal if council does not adopt an amendment within 90 days of recipient of the application for a zoning and 120 days for an official plan amendment. To submit written comment on these amendments prior to their consideration by council on February 25th, please email or call the committee or council coordinator. Note to committee member, councilors, a reminder, if you have any motion on any of the items listed today, please send a copy to us ahead of the public delegation so that committee member and staff have an opportunity to review and, as necessary, clarify your motion during the discussion of the matter. Thank you. So before we go to our consent agenda, Mr. Desjardins, maybe we'll have roll call. And I'd like to welcome Councillor Leeper to our meeting today as well. Go ahead.
Chair. Councillor Kitts.
Here, sorry, I couldn't find my mute button.
Councillor DeRuse.
Here.
Councillor Moffat.
Here.
Councillor Meehan.
Here.
Councillor Harder.
Here.
Vice Chair Gower.
Here.
And Chair El Shantiri.
Present. Thank you.
You have quorum.
Thank you, Mr. Desjardins. Declaration of interest. See none. We'll go through our consent agenda and we'll come back to so confirmation of minute 19 of December 3rd, 2020, the Agriculture and Rural Affairs Committee meeting on the minutes confirmed. Okay, thank you. We do have a presentation, Rural Ontario Municipal Association Municipality Connectivity Roadmap, and for that reason we invited Councillor Leeper as the chair of the IT subcommittee, but we'll come back to the presentation momentarily. Item number 2 from Planning, Infrastructure and Economic Development Planning Service. Item number 2 is the High Social Impact Projects Program that the Agriculture and Rural Affairs Committees recommend Council receive this report for information. Can we receive this report?
Received.
Received.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Item number 3, we'll hold item number 3 as that's 4497 O'Keefe Court. We have 3 presentations, one from our staff, one from Ms. Susan Brown-Smith, and from Orchard State Community Association, and also from Andrew Glass, the Properties Group applicant. So we'll hold item 3. Item number 4 is the Public Works and Environmental Service Department, Parks, Forestry, and Storm Water Service. And item 4 is Faulkner Municipal Drain Amendment. The engineer's report we have, but we do have 2 delegations to speak on this report, so we'll hold item number 4. So we'll go to item number 1, and it's a presentation from Roma. I'm going to ask our clerk to share the screen and put the presentation on the screen, if you don't mind. Thank you very much. I try to be brief about this, but this is very important to all of us. I think lately we're all receiving daily email about e-learning and e-health and the lack of strong broadband in the rural area. Next, and Roma, just for our colleague, Roma is the Rural Ontario Municipality Association. We work together with AMO. AMO represents 444 municipalities in Ontario, and Roma is a function to deal with all rural issue in Ontario. And obviously, we all know Ottawa, 80% of Ottawa is in the rural. For that reason, we've always been participant in Roma almost every year. And I want to thank Councillor DeRose, usually attend Roma alongside myself. Next slide, please. So a little bit about this, as I mentioned, Roma and working together with AMO. AMO is a non-partisan, not-for-profit association, advocate on behalf of Ontario municipality with Ontario government. Next slide, please. So here's what Roma has done. Roma been very strong voice for quite some time now, speaking of broadband. And 2 years ago, when Premier Ford attended Roma, he declared broadband for the rural area is an essential service. Just like having water, electricity on road, we should have good broadband service. And we've been working together with both level of government. And as we, last year, the federal government announced funding for connectivity and what they call it the last mile. And I'm not here as a technical person, but I just want you to know we work together with our local MP in our community. Also, Roma work with the government and kept this file alive even during pandemic. That was the topic we're talking about the most, even this year's more than other years, about the lack of broadband service to the rural area. And when, and sometimes we hear also from our colleague, not necessarily in a rural area, we hear about them, Councillor Harden more than once said, I can't have my video on in the morning if I'm at home in Barrhaven. So, and Barrhaven is not a, obviously is a high density area. So broadband issue is right across, I would say, across the city, if it's, and across a lot of small municipality. And there's a chart, I don't want to read it for you, but you can all see the health, the education, the leisure, entertainment, all this, the connectivities we need. Next slide, please. I know I'm going through those slides quickly, but I just want to make sure to have time for my colleague, Jeff Leeper, also to have a comment about this, and we'll have staff to continue that discussion. So continue to advocate to the federal government to expedite rollout of broadband. And I think lately, some of my colleagues, especially the rural councillor, they've been seeing with the mayor some letter of support for some of the small companies operate in the rural area, support them to enter that, what you call emergency funding for broadband. We met with Minister Monsef, and she told us there's $1.75 billion the federal government have set aside for the next year, with a mandate to help modernize the broadband and improve broadband service to the rural Canada specifically. But Ontario and the federal working together on share funding. And the reason I brought this item, because I know Roma did a great roadmap for broadband in a rural area, and I didn't want to bring the whole presentation here because it will take quite a bit of time, but maybe our staff, clerk staff, can email it to you after if you already don't have it, or you can visit Roma and you can download it. Is there? It's called a roadmap for broadband in the rural area. Next one, please. So here, what the recommendation, the actions on telecommunications: build better relationship with municipal government, share information more consistent. And so I don't want to read it, but this is what we are looking for. If it's too cost prohibitive to build in area of need, do not, there's other technology today we are hearing about, to develop a sustained relationship with the municipal government. And I think this is our role, where we need in the city a point of contact. So in the past, and that's why I invited Chris Cope to this meeting, in the last 20 years, when we started with the city of Ottawa, Chris Cope was expert matter in broadband. We worked together with him at the time, and to bring broadband to the rural area. And I believe the city invested almost $750,000 at the time, helping to erect those towers and helping to bring some cell service to the emergency services in the rural area to be all on the same technology their colleagues in the urban or suburban. So we work together with Chris Cope, and even now, any question about the information, the layout of we heard lately is quite a bit of companies, small companies, looking to invest in a rural area and bring fiber optic. And what's our role here as a municipality? Obviously, they're requesting some of it, the use of the utility, Hydro One or Hydro Ottawa utility pole, use the right of way from the city of Ottawa, and what else the city can help to provide. And that's why we're looking for economic development to be helping us to respond to some of those requests coming from other. Next slide, please. And he's determined what role municipality can play. Obviously, I spoke a little bit too soon about this, but this is clearly, the advocacy side, the municipal owned broadband network, and how could we help? So we get so many requests from company looking for a letter of support from the mayor and the rural councillors. How could we maximize that role of us, and how can we help them? Obviously the municipality don't have the money. The federal government and the provincial government are put together toward improvement for broadband services in the rural municipalities, but nevertheless we have a role to play, and I like that role to be clear, so to all of us. When I spoke with Councillor Kitts, she was telling me she had the same issue in the east part of the city, in the rural area when it comes to broadband, and I have the same problem in Kinburn in the west end of the city. Next slide, please. So here is the again how the implementation and how so we have I have someone from Carleton University reach out at the university, like to work with the municipality. There's a possibility of a partnership, and how could we do some municipal access agreement, and obviously there's so many balls in the air, but in the end of the day, residents come to us and they think as a municipal councillors we have all the answers, and even when we say this is not a municipal really issue, we like to help, we like to work with other level of government, they still expect us to follow up, they expect us to lead, and obviously I understand the challenge they have, especially family with the kids at home in Kinburn or in Starfield or anywhere part of the rural part of the city. They're having a challenge today with the e-learning and have their kids working from home or learning from home. Next step. Next slide, please. And here's the Universal Broadband Fund. There's so much fund we hear about, this is where Roma landed with the federal government when we met with Minister Monsef. The government of Canada committed the 1.75 billion over 6 years, 750 million available for large impact projects, and 50 million available to support mobile projects that primarily benefit Indigenous peoples or community, and up to 150 million available as a part of rapid response stream. And that's the one getting some attention lately because all the applicant has to be submitted by February 15. This is in addition to the 600 million agreement with the Telsat to secure advanced low Earth orbit LEO capacity. Next. And again, as I said, the applications, the rapid response was due, I think, not January 15, I believe. Oh, sorry, yes. The rest of the program due February 15 with the project to be completed by March 31st, 2027. Next. I think
that's it, Chair.
That's my last slide. Thank you very much, Kat, for running the, and I see Councillor Harder put her hand up, but before we go to Councillor Harder, I was wondering if Chris Cope, did I miss anything? Because obviously we've been working with you very closely with Roma and all the information. Did I miss anything from my presentation?
I think your presentation is very complete, with the possible exception of just naming the provincial support through their program that they call ICON, where they too have offered some money, and both the provincial and the federal program allow stacking. So a telco could actually apply for both and take money from both to complete a build. Okay.
Councillor Leeper, would you like to add something I miss or something you think we need to, as a municipal or as a municipal government, we need to do as far as support to those companies coming to us who operate in a rural area? We are providing a letter up. So go ahead, Councillor Leeper.
Yep, I just want to see if Lily maybe mutes her mic. No, and thank you very much for the presentation. The rural broadband connectivity issue is a really frustrating one. I actually just did a quick speed test sitting here in Hintonburg, and with 3 adults in the house, most of us are on Zoom at the same time. I'm getting 280 megs per second download and 21 up. You know, the disparity between what is available in the rural areas and in the urban areas is often very striking. The city has actually begun to do some of that work with rights-of-way folks to ensure that when providers want to bring things like fiber out to the rural areas, that we're trying to facilitate that. In the governance review, something that Councillor Moffat and I worked on last term of council, where small providers were having a difficult time getting municipal access agreements to hang their equipment on our poles. We've now delegated that to staff to try to avoid the council vote and to try to ensure that that's moving more quickly. We do have a smart city strategy, and that smart city strategy recognizes that broadband connectivity for the whole city can be a spectrum of responses. Everything from simply making sure that at the staff level that we're providing some concierge service to providers who want to serve, all the way up to providing municipal broadband as an ISP. I don't think that this council is interested in becoming an ISP, but there are a lot of steps shy of that we can do in terms of using some of the assets the city has. You mentioned them in your presentation. We have poles, we have conduits, we have a utility company in Hydro Ottawa that has expertise, trying to ensure that we are leveraging those assets as best we can to ensure rollout. I know our IT staff have been extraordinarily busy for the last year, just trying to ensure that, you know, our corporation is able to work from home, and they're scrambling to keep our partners afloat in terms of IT connectivity. But I think you can expect to see that, you know, as we continue to roll out smart city thinking, that the role of the city in providing broadband is going to continue to be a priority, because, you know, not only are we have issues around the affordability of broadband internet, as well as simply making broadband internet available to many people in rural areas at all. So I'll just leave it there, and I'm curious to hear from the rest of committee.
Thank you very much, Councillor Leeper. Councillor Harder, and then Councillor Moffat.
Thanks, Chair. El Shantari. You know, it's been, I think, kind of a lost opportunity for about 4 years that we've been at the farm. Oh, it's 3.5 years now, at the farm across from the Sportsplex area X.0. I mean, in a city that has the best of the companies in Canada, and second, you know, second only in IT to Silicon Valley in the States. And with the opportunity there surrounded by dark fiber that Hydro Ottawa has laid, and all the technology that's in there, 5G. I mean, I don't know why we haven't been chosen, other than the fact we're the nation's capital, and we tend to be punished for that sometimes. You know, why would we want to keep you know, a large amount of money here for a solution? I think we have the capacity right here to do that. And I think that, you know, as every level of government comes out with more money to service rural broadband in Canada, we should have a piece of that, because we have an incredible setup that we can use in the heart of our city, in the geographic center of Ottawa. It's quite amazing. So keep plugging away. Somebody will make a breakthrough someday. Invest Ottawa, well, Chris will tell you, works extremely well and has a lot of expertise in this area, as well as the staff that work with them. So I think the more people we have looking for those opportunities and that funding, the sooner it will happen. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Harder. Councillor Moffat.
Thanks. I was almost aghast when Jeff said that he gets 280 up. There was a day in the fall where I was 1 up, 1 down. That was the service level I was getting. So I have, you know, I live out more remote area, so been working with different providers, and I know Xplornet's been, I've actually upgraded within Xplornet to better service now, because they are expanding their service offering in the area. Storm as well. I spoke with Bell. Intend to reach out and speak with Rogers and TELUS too, just focusing on that. You know, we have a lot of customers, and we all do in the rural area, that constantly reach out to us about these issues. So, you know, any work that Roma can do, I know AMO does a lot of work on this front as well, but anything that that can be done. Xplornet's currently looking at the grant program to provide better service throughout rural Ottawa. You know, I personally, whoever the service provider is, I'm not really too concerned. What I care about is that we do what we can to get the best service possible for our constituents across this city. We often do get left out. I know there's the Eastern Ontario Resource Network that is doing a 1 gig project. Ottawa's left out of that. So it's, you know, they're kind of doing their thing together, and then we have to sort of focus on our own because we're part of that bigger city. So it's a bit of a gap. It can be sometimes, and we need to work with our private partners, the ISPs, to be able to hopefully capitalize on some of these investment opportunities from the provincial federal governments. Thanks, Eli.
Thank you, Councillor Moffat. Councillor Kidd.
Thank you, Chair. I know that when we were chatting prior to this meeting, and when we had a conversation, we had some interesting ideas about an opportunity to partner with the city, lend us some of their resources, potentially some of their grant money to sort of explore this. But they were really looking for a point person, a city staff member that could be the point person. And I know we were both hoping that could be identified. So is that Mr. Cope, or is that still yet to be determined?
Well, I'm not sure if Mr. Willis on the call. I did speak with Mr. Willis, and if there's a direction here, I am preparing. I would introduce it after we hear from all my colleagues. You're right. What we are missing all along, you got an email from a resident, asking so many questions. We're not technical people. The best thing to do, we always do, send it to Chris Cope. Chris Cope, work with our staff. So that's what we look. And there's so many opportunity out there, whether from the federal government or the provincial government or the private service. Councillor Moffat talked about them. Like we met with all of them, and we invite them to our ward, and we show them, and we work with. But I mean, at the end of the day, you need someone to be a quarterback, and that's what I'm looking for. And I know when we talk about staffing in the city during the pandemic, everybody looked the other way. They're scared. But we do have within our own organization, people be available to do this work for us. And I'm hoping after I do my direction and staff come back to us in the second quarter, we have a clear direction or position where we are in. But right now, as we speak, in the rural broadband, it's to do with economic development. Innovation technology is with Valerie Turner's. I mean, we need them working together, and I think the two groups need to work. But as far as I'm concerned, my advice to you, anytime you have a question of this nature, I will send it to Mr. Cope, or send it to me, and I'll try to help get to the answer we need. Because your issue in the East End, same thing, Kinburn or south of the city or anywhere in the cities. But I will read my direction to staff after. Thank you. Councillor DeRouche.
Okay, great.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I know that we've been talking about very important subject for broadband in general in rural areas specifically. And I want to touch on Councillor Moffat's comment, because I'm not going to repeat what he said, because we all face it every day, day in and day out. Like we're all in it, we're all in the same, we all have same issues, same challenges. But also Councillor Shantiri, he's been working through Roma in the last 5 years to making sure also that to consider Ottawa when they put their planning and when they put the rural grant, to making sure Ottawa got some of it. And the issue in the previous, when we had the grant for natural gas or any other things, city of Ottawa were considered major cities, so we would not be able to get any of these grants. So I want to thank Councillor Shantiri and the effort that his effort in Roma and AMO to bring this attention to our ministers at the provincial level to kind of take a look at it, because really, like Councillor Moffat mentioned, if Eastern Ontario had a specific program, we are excluded from it. So there's been lots of work happening behind the scene, and the city of Ottawa, like we all know, we have major geographically challenging an issue. So like east, south, north, we're all having the same challenges. So I just want to take that moment to thank you, Councillor Shantiri, and thank Councillor Moffat, because we understand the issue, because we know what's going on. And I'm hoping throughout the challenges and in the future, when there is grant come out, we'll keep advocating for the resident in rural Ottawa to making sure to get some money out of that one. So thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councillor DeRouche. Councillor Meehan.
Thank you, Chair. I don't want to state the obvious, but this has been an issue for such a long time, and it's taken on quite the urgency right now. And I'm just wondering if, when in any of our communication, if there's a way to highlight that this is no longer an option, that it can't wait, that this is affecting children's schooling, it's affecting their future, that someone's just got, the burners have to be put on now. And if there's a way to highlight that this can't be an option, that we can't wait anymore, that this has to be done and done fast. So I'm sure that people who know a lot more than me can figure out how that should be. But I think it is an emergency right now, and not just in the rural areas. We're all through the city. We're facing this. You know, Jeff was saying what he's facing. In my home, it's the same thing. You know, and so it is prohibitive. I'm always asking the kids, can you stay off the computer this morning? Can you, this kind of thing, so that we can get into meetings. So yeah, this is an emergency, and we've got to do something now. So that's all I have to say. Thanks.
Thank you, Councilor Mahans. And again, what Councilor Kitts and I were talking about is so many effort out there. We hear so many application out there, so much money from the federal, from the province, from other, and how could we help I know the city doesn't have money, and I'm not asking the city for money, but we're asking the city to help those groups who's coming to us for assistance, whether with the right-of-way, utility, anything. And I think Councillor Leeper, I think 3-4 years ago, was trying to make sure the small company also have a role to play, not just the major provider. So there's a direction here, and we might have to feel free to modify it, but I'm going to read it. Direct staff to bring an information report to ERAC no later than the end of Q2 2021 to describe the current policy and financial environment on rural broadband, the role of the senior government, the role of the city, and area that economic development with support from right-of-way can advocate for improved services in the rural Ottawa. So, and honestly, I put it in rural Ottawa, but I think it would be fair to say in Ottawa without just the rural, because we all have this issue. And I will take the word and I will give it to Mr. Desjardins. So I'm going to have it with service in Ottawa without the rural. And Councillor DeRose is right. There's also, we need help from our senior management to always include Ottawa when we talk about rural broadband, rural natural gas, any application, because it seems if we're not on the table, they think the city, it's the capital of Canada, so they're not rural. And every time we have to make our case, no, 80% of Ottawa is rural, and we have the same issue any other rural municipality have. So if no other speaker, I'd like to receive this presentation. Can we receive it, and with the direction to staff and to come back to us in the Q2 of 2021 for improved service in Ottawa?
Received, Mr. Chair.
Yep.
Thank you very much, and thank you very much, Councillor Leeper, for joining us today. Feel free to stay if you like. We're a friendly group. Thank you. Now we go to item number 3. Item number 3, 4497 O'Keefe Court, and I'm going to ask, I believe Mr. Moore's going to do the presentation. I'm not sure if Mr. James is going to do introduction to the report. I'll leave it to you folks. Oh, here's Doug. Okay.
Yeah.
Good morning, Mr. James.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you. Yeah, well, if what we have, Chair and members of the committee, is a quick presentation. We have Lily here today to answer questions along with Sean Moore, who is the file lead. So I'll turn it over to Sean, who will give us as I said, a quick presentation.
Okay, thank you, Mr. James. Sean?
Thank you. Thanks, Doug. Good morning, Mr. Chair. My name's Sean Moore. I'm the file lead for this zoning report. You can go to the next slide. So the subject site is approximately 7-hectare parcel. It abuts Highway 416 to the immediate west, and the city park, which is Lytle Park, to the east. The Cedar Hill Golf and Country Club and Orchard Estates subdivision is located approximately 350 meters from the property to the east and northeast. And there's also an expansion of a state lot residential subdivision to the north, and a draft plan expansion for it. And the lands immediately abutting this subject property would be conservation lands, because there's some wetlands immediately north of 4497. And there's also a proposal to connect that future expansion of the estate lot with a public road that would go down between the subject lands and Lytle Park, connecting to O'Keefe Court. So their proposal for a future city street to the immediately west of Lytle Park. The lands surrounding are all on private services, and south of O'Keefe Court is a business park that's developing, and that's in the urban area. You can go to the next slide, please. So in the official plan, the subject property is in the general rural area, and it represents, O'Keefe Court represents the divide of the urban and rural area. Should be noted, in 2008, there was an application to this committee to bring municipal water to 4497 O'Keefe, which was approved, and it remains on private septic. Next slide, please. So this just gives context of the urban area to the south and the secondary plan, which is in place for the business park on the south side of O'Keefe. That's in the area 9 and 10 secondary plan. That's a business park that has zoning which doesn't permit warehousing. Next slide, please. So the subject proposal. So existing today, the permitted uses on the subject property are warehousing, light industrial, office, research and development, tech industry. The proposal is to amend the exception zone because it has an exception 401R, which basically there's a statement in there that says any single warehouse use may occupy up to a maximum 50% of the gross floor area of any building. So the applicant is proposing to remove that provision and maintain all the other provisions, so all the other land uses. And there's also a holding symbol on the property which requires site plan control to be approved before the H can be lifted. So if we just dive into that provision, I could give you an example of what that would mean. Is so, for example, today, roughly given parking requirements, septic field requirements, the lot coverage they're permitted in their zoning, they could conceivably, or the applicant could build a 250 square foot building. And half of that could be warehousing. The other half would have to be occupied by another tenant, such as a light industrial use. So that's a 125,000 square foot warehouse. Or they could propose multiple buildings, such as 200,000 square foot buildings with 50% occupancy of being a warehouse. So that's currently what the applicant could do. Next slide, please. So staff are recommending approval to remove 50%. As the lands are immediately located to within about 1,000 meters of Grand Village. We end the zoning to attract a tenant, a single-use tenant of even 10,000 square meters or square feet. The applicant would have to do some sort of amendment to that 50%. We also support it. Just the matter of fact that also the H exists on the property. So no matter what, the applicant is going to have to go through a site plan control process and deal with lift the holding provision once they seek site plan approval. Once we know more about the tenant and the nature of the buildings and who would occupy them, then staff would require a further transportation study to figure out exactly the users of the building and how that has impact on signals down the street or accesses and so forth. And finally, this is a site plan. There was an active site plan in 2016 that remains on hold while the applicant, I guess, determines what kind of tenants they can bring to this the property and how they're going to reconfigure the buildings and so forth. But this is one of their concepts that they have developed. Overall, the applicant's concept is for a multi-building site with multiple tenants and looking for flexibility to attract different tenants into the various buildings. And I'll leave it at that and just want to thank you for the presentation.
Thank you very much, Sean. And since we have two other presentations, we'll hear them all and then we can take questions to staff or to Ms. Brown and Smith or to Andrew Blast, the proponent. So we'll go to Susan. Susan, are you available for your presentation? Oh, I see you on the You're on mute, Susan.
Hello, Eli.
Hello.
Chair, councilors, a pleasure to see you all.
So this is not your first rodeo. You know, Susan, you have 5 minutes and I know you have a presentation for us.
I do. Is Mark going to pull that up for everyone?
I believe the clerk is working on
It's coming up very shortly. Here we go.
Okay, there we go. Because we don't want to stop the clock when I only have 5 minutes.
That's right.
Okay, so I'm going to run through this very quickly. I would like to thank you all very much for the opportunity to provide this presentation to the committee with regards to the public application. Slide 2, please. I don't want to duplicate what Sean provided, but one of the things that's really key here is that the O'Keefe Court is a boundary of a large rural zone that spans the 416 to Hunt Club, to Woodruff, back up Fallowfield, and back down O'Keefe. And we really treasure this rural area as the city grows up around us, and it's been especially special during the COVID-19 lockdowns. The Prestige Business Park, which is shown there on the slide in green, serves as a rural to urban transition zone. It's special. All of the stakeholders have worked together to create something that is going to work for everybody. The Prestige Business Park, any development that's downstream has to be, must not undermine that rural to urban transition zone. And O'Keefe benefits as a protected local road. 4497 is not an island unto itself, and any development there must be complementary. Next slide, please. 4497. We implore the committee to appreciate the fundamental change the zoning amendment has on the property and the surrounding lands. It will permit a single tenant, large scale warehouse or distribution center complex. The size and number of the buildings does not change this outcome. This use has already been rejected as non-compliant and does not fit with the Prestige Business Park rural to urban transition zone. So what's changed? The 50% restriction was put in place as a compromise to support the original business park concept of multi-tenant, multi-uses that complement the Prestige Business Park. And this compromise must be respected. There is no net benefit to our adjacent lands or our community from this zoning amendment. And in fact, it achieves the opposite outcome. Next slide. Traffic. It's not the only concern that we have, but boy, is it a biggie. Everyone agrees that the current traffic studies are out of date and a poor foundation for an informed decision. This table shows the original traffic that was anticipated with the property is 4 small to medium trucks running in the day. And that is vastly different from 15 to 16 40-foot, 80-ton trucks running at night, potentially every 2 to 3 minutes. And that is what this zoning amendment will permit. So why would we remove a restriction that incentivizes this outcome based on data that we know is wrong? Next slide. Provincial policy statement. The point of this slide is that a single tenant large distribution center would require costly infrastructure changes, rural incompatibility issues, and development patterns not compliant with the provincial policy statement, and it is not guidelines and they must be respected. Next slide, employment area vision. Employment area vision is a valuable and important planning tool. It informs planning decisions for the subject property. Respecting this vision is paramount to minimizing impact on surrounding lands. Warehousing is only one of many options that the developer has to make a positive contribution to the area, and it is a jewel. So why are we incentivizing a use that is less than optimum and encourages the very type of truck traffic we seek to avoid? Last slide, recommendation. Committee, you have the power to decide how development proceeds. We implore you to make an informed and balanced decision with net positive benefits to all stakeholders, not just one. And you are not informed. The traffic data is out of date. The potential long-term impacts are horrific. Traffic, health, environment, and more. And now is the time for ARAC to show leadership. If the applicant chooses to bring forward an application that provides us all with sufficient details so that all stakeholders can make informed decisions with awareness of the impacts, we would welcome that. Working together, we can accomplish amazing developments. But throwing away a compromise that was put in place for a very good reason to begin with is not the way that the good development should proceed. And for that reason, the Orchard Estates Community Association recommends that you deny the application. Thank you. And I hope I have achieved getting in my 5-minute wire.
You did, Susan. Thank you very much
Thank you,
for your
Irad.
presentation. And we'll go to the final presentation.
Okay, yes, go ahead.
So Andrew Glass is the properties group applicant. We also have a power presentation. Mr. Glass, are you?
Yes, I'm here. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, sir, we can.
Oh, very good. Thank you. Again, my name is Andrew Glass. I'm Director of Development Acquisitions here at the Properties Group, and thank you for the opportunity to respond to this application. You know, this has obviously gathered a lot of attention over the last few days. Seems to be some great concern about the size of what we have here or what we're proposing. So I think the site plan is up on the screen that you have in front of you. Just preface things, that it is not our intention to develop the site as an Amazon type Wayfair scale type distribution warehouse. That has never been our intention. We see the market opportunity, we see the market opportunity here for smaller light industrial and warehouse type uses, but nothing of the scale that we see at Amazon. The likes of which could include, plumbing parts suppliers, electrical parts suppliers that have a warehouse component together with an accessory showroom, but not on that scale. The conceptual plan that you see in front of you there is a campus style development comprised of several buildings totaling, as Sean pointed out, somewhere between 200 and 250,000 square feet. The concept plan is, it's nowhere near the scale of what has happened or is happening with the Amazon. And I don't mean to pick on Amazon, but if you look at the 69,000 square foot building, for comparison purposes only, that's slightly smaller, about 10,000 square feet smaller than the Loblaw store at the Barhaven Town Center. And the other buildings, such as the 19,000 square foot building, again, these are concept, the plan has no status, it's still subject to site plan approval. That building would be about the size of what you've been to, the Farm Boy at Woodbridge and Claridge. Again, the other three or four that are shown here in the 35, 40,000 square foot range, that's your Metro store. That's the scale. So I'm just trying to distance ourselves from the Amazon type size. So that's what I'm trying to get across here. The proposed campus is comprised of several buildings. So it's understood now that there's a motion that is being considered to remove this 50% cap on warehousing within a building. And just to point out the difference there, if you look at that 19,000 square foot building, with that 50% cap that's there, if we had a tenant that came to us and said, I'll use like a Westburn Ruddy Electric, a plumbing, like an electrical parts supplier, came to us and said, yeah, we need about 19,000 feet. And we have to turn around and say, well, we can give you 8. And they go somewhere else. Well, that's the type of tenant that this zoning that is in place contemplated. And now with that cap, it frustrates or it prevents us from tenanting the building with that type of a tenant. So removing that cap. Now, to get to the idea of get to some sort of compromise here in the spirit of cooperation, that we understand there's a motion on the table where we have agreed to a hard cap on the size of any individual warehouse type tenant. And I think the hard cap that we've sort of come to is about 88,000 square feet. I use square feet, about 8,175 square meters. That should give the community association enough comfort that this is not going to be on the same scale, anywhere close to being the same scale as a Wayfair or a Amazon type warehouse. And we're, in the spirit of cooperation, we're satisfied to live with that compromise. And we would hope that the community association would find their way to find that satisfactory as well. Many of the other issues that were brought up by Ms. Brownrigg are things like traffic. That would be dealt with at site plan approval stage. Provincial policy statement issues, the infrastructure improvements that revolve around building that interchange there, that supports this type of use. That's what the provincial policy statement tries to encourage, is that
1 minute.
Use the existing infrastructure that's there to support the land uses that are being proposed, as opposed to building new infrastructure somewhere else. With that, I'll leave it. I'll turn it back over to the chair, and thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Glass, for your presentation. Also, we received 5 emails. All against the report have been received and circulated to committee members. Now we receive all 3 presentations. We're going to ask committee member if they have any question and who they need to direct their question to. So we have staff, we have the community Orchard Community Association, and we have Andrew on behalf of the proponent group. So any question from committee members? Councillor Moffat, I see you had up. Go ahead.
Thank you. I find that this application is somewhat similar almost to a situation that we dealt with at this committee about a year and a half ago almost, in terms of an application of existing land zoned for these types of purposes, general rural lands in the village of Northcourt. What I find is that the opportunity to come to committee with an application like this gives us a chance to address some of those concerns from a larger perspective scale. So the concern here appears to be mainly that, well, I'm not going to say, I don't want to minimize or anything, but one of the main concerns is that it could become one large scale operation site on this property. I think the motion before the proposed motion, the proposed amendment to cap the building size, I think really helps address that. I'm just interested in hearing from Ms. Branrig-Smith their thoughts on that compromise, where we would put a cap on the building footprint so that no building larger than, I believe it's 78,000 square feet could be built on this site.
Ms. Brownron?
Yeah,
Okay, go ahead,
thank you, Scott. Can everyone hear me?
Yes, yes, we can.
Good. Thank you, Scott, so much for that question. I do appreciate it. And I would like to thank Andrew Glass for his presentation as well, and Sean Moore. In response to your question, I think there's 2 points that we need to bring forward. The motion, and I have had an opportunity to review it, actually doesn't solve the problem, because the site is allowed to be 100% warehousing. That's our current conundrum. So the size of the building it's a red herring, and the intentions of the developer are a red herring. The fact of the matter is, this zoning amendment, as currently written, would allow 100% large scale distribution or warehousing complex, and the building size restriction does not achieve the net benefit outcome that we're looking for, which is to ensure that the development proceeds in a manner where the type of traffic is scaled back to that with the original concept for the site. And yes, there are certain items that can be looked at later in terms of when we get to site plan and how the provincial policy statement will apply, et cetera. But fundamentally, what we're not seeing here is any net benefit to any stakeholder other than the applicant. And it actually incentivizes the very type of development that we all agree is not optimum.
All right, thanks. Yeah, it's tough, right? Because transportation issues, traffic issues are generally associated with the site plan process and not necessarily with the zoning process. And I tried to work with this on with staff to understand exactly what's being asked for here, and understanding that a building of, let's say, 100,000 square feet could be built on this site. That would actually be 50% warehouse on one side and 50% warehouse on the other side. So it's, the fact that that exists, that it could be a 100,000 square foot warehouse just separated in two with 2 different tenants, seems to be at odds with the notion that it's an issue to remove the 50% cap, because it seems like the warehouse use is there no matter what. Now we're just seeing that they want to proceed with maybe just 100% of a building to be one tenant. And I don't know if I see that as being such a negative, considering the existing zoning does permit 100% of a building to be a warehouse as is, merely that there would just be 2 occupants. So thanks for the presentation. That's kind of where I'm at with this right now.
Thank you. Thank you, Councilor Moffat.
Mr. Chair.
I'd like it. Yes, I was going to say, Councilor
Yeah.
Hart, maybe we should introduce your motion, please.
Yeah, thank you. I was going to ask you if you wanted me to, and then, Ms. Brownrigg-Smith is aware of this motion because we had quite a long chat last night. And although probably none of you know Susan Brownrigg-Smith, I can say that in my entire elected life of almost 24 years, not one single person knows as much about planning in Barrhaven as Susan Brownrigg-Smith. And I say that having represented all of Barrhaven as it grew until 2006. And then that would include people in Heart's Desire who definitely know a lot as well. But Susan, I would say, is one of the architects of areas 9 and 10, going back to the 90s. So she knows of that which she speaks. So what this motion does, and it surprises me, it doesn't give Susan and her community what they want, which is sustain the previously agreed to position. But I am surprised, quite frankly, that at the willingness of the applicant to put this in writing and to agree to it. And so the important part, I think, is the fact that it speaks to no single warehouse building and or use can be greater than 8,175.5 square meters of gross floor area in size. And also, Ms. Brownrigg-Smith had asked to defer the item until the next ARAC meeting, but instead of that, this was supposed to rise to council next Wednesday. And I'm asking you to support delaying that, deferring it until February 24th council meeting. Because I know that Susan wants to work on it further, and I support that. So as I said, this is, well, actually, as Councillor Moffat said, right now, their right to have a warehouse exists. Their right to have a much larger warehouse than what this motion will do exists. I think up to 125,000 square feet. And this will restrict it to about 88,000 square feet. I think that personally, and Susan knows this, so does Lily, because Lily was the planner on the file every time we've talked about this. I've never liked this. I've also always thought of it that it was a waste of this land at this location. I am, the difficulty has always been, though, the fact that it is rural. So on one side of O'Keefe, you have Prestige Business Park, because Prestige Business Park is on city services completely, whereas this one has been allowed to connect to our water system, but still will have a septic bed, which will take up part of the property as well. And unless that changes, and as you know, at our joint committee that all the members of ARAC were part of, and planning committee, this area we had 2 presentations to include it and to change it from rural to urban. And one was from Mr. Noel Pereira, and the other one was from Mattamy. And so were that to happen, that would be a game changer for this land as well. So we have what we have to deal with. We have an application before us. Susan's concerns, and Susan, I'm just calling you Susan because, not to be rude, but it's just who we are. but because I think that it makes it better, we have the compliance of the applicant, and they will be on advised and on record of understanding how important this land is to the integrity of this community. It's very important, and they're always going to be on the watch. You know, I told you about the history that I have with the community, but in particular with Susan. So you had the motion on the screen. I don't think that I need to read it out because you all can read yourself. And as I said, Susan has seen this. Somebody's trying to get me on my phone here. I made the mistake of coming to the ward office. That's why there's all kinds of stuff happening. I'm the only one here, but it's distracting. So I would ask you to support this. I look forward to further discussion with the applicant and with Susan. And when I think back to how we got to the original agreement, it really was about those places like a Westboro kind of a carpet place, or Horizon Kitchen Place, or where people would go to a showroom and there'd be a warehouse to that would deliver to a high growth area. And the location, would serve Kempville to Prescott, for that matter. Certainly, it would be a great location. Anyway, I think that this makes it better, and I would ask that you support this, please. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Chair Harder, and we still have hands up. I thought Vice Chair has his hand up first, but we'll go to Councillor Meehan. Councillor Meehan.
Oh, thank you, Chair. I'm just wondering, I want to ask staff, are we going to be updating some of the information, like the studies on traffic? Will that be happening before we make an ultimate decision on this property?
Well, traffic, I mean, staff can answer that, but traffic is going to come part of the site plan approval. Right now, we're talking about the zoning application, but maybe staff, Sean or Lily want to answer.
Okay, go ahead.
I was going to say, Mr. Chair, that's correct, that there's a site plan would come forward to implement whatever buildings they're looking to construct, and we would require our update to the transportation study at that time, because right now there is a 2016 transportation study that's higher level, showing their vision of their multiple buildings, and that's what we're relying on, but depends on what configuration and what uses come forward with the site plan.
Councillor Meehan, you're on mute. You muted.
I'm just wondering, my concern sometimes is because Ms. Brownrigg-Smith was citing the outdated studies being used for this zoning application, that sometimes I think we do it backwards, that we should be looking at the impacts of any great development on this area right now, what it's going to do to traffic in the area. Once it's at site plan, sometimes it just goes through because it's gone through that stage. I may be wrong, because I've been wrong a lot, but I am concerned about that. I don't know if Ms. Smith can address that. If it is a legitimate concern for her, I don't think it is for me too.
Yeah, thank you, Caroline. Sorry, Eli, am I allowed to respond?
Yes, please go ahead. Yeah, we said we question all of you at the same time.
Okay, Caroline, thank you very much for your question. We do know that the traffic studies, when they are combined for the area, are grossly out of date. We do know that the build out and the approved developments far exceed what the current traffic studies are. And you raise a very good point. We have concerns that if a zoning amendment is brought forward, yet the road infrastructure is really not there, and it's going to exacerbate bottlenecks. And in addition to that, the amendment itself would undermine the basic principles of O'Keefe being a rural local road. Then passing this amendment or even a motion, quite frankly, I don't even think is fair to the developer. because it's creating a scenario where there are expectations created that downstream, the site plan may not even be feasible. So as you say, in some respects, we are putting the cart before the horse. And we are concerned that the zoning amendment simply exacerbates that problem at this point.
Any other question, Councillor Meehan?
No, but thank you. I appreciate the answer.
Any other question from my colleagues? I see none. So we're going to vote on the motion from Chair Harder or Councillor Harder on this item. I believe our legal staff are okay with referring this till February 24th council meeting. So it doesn't go to council on February 10th, it will go to council 24th. So therefore be it resolved that staff recommended maintaining that proposal to remove the 50% gross floor area cap, but to be amended to introduce a new cap on the size of a single warehouse building, such as new exception, as added to section 240 rural exception 400R, Coleman V, stating no single warehouse building and/or use can be greater than 8,175.5 square meter in size, and therefore be it resolved that the rezoning report for 4497 O'Keefe Court be deferred until February 24, 2021 City Council meeting. They further resolved that there is no further notice pursuant to this plan and subsection 34, subsection 17.
Mr. Chair, I'm sorry to interrupt you. Can I just say one thing? I noticed an error. It should be 401R in the exception zone. I don't want that overlooked.
No, it is exception 400R. Yes, you're right.
It should be 401.
N1, okay.
Yes,
so
sorry.
We can replace the R to N1?
401R should be the correct.
Okay, 401. Okay, thank you. I think the clerk took notes of the changes. So do we need the ayes and nays on the motion or the motion carry?
Carried.
Carried. Okay, okay. So the motion carried, and on the item, carry as amended?
Carry as amended.
Carried.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, folks. Thank you. Thank you, Susan and Andrew, for your presentation, and to our staff as well. Now we go to item number 4, Faulkner Municipal Drain Amendment to the Engineer's Report. Now we do have 2 folks, delegation, Jeff Dawson as a delegate to speak on item number 4. Jeff, I see you on the screen, but Mark, can you let Mr. Dawson?
Can you hear me now?
Yes, Mr. Dawson, we can. Go ahead. You have 5 minutes to address the committee.
I own the property at the very south end of the Faulkner Drain. We've been farming there for 200 years. We lost the northeast corner of our farm in the 70s when they realigned the Shea Road. And now you're going to take more land from to widen the ditch. I'm really not satisfied with the amount of compensation that's showing in the chart, Schedule F. To me, it works out to about $7,000 an acre. And properties in the area have been selling for almost $20,000 an acre. There are 5 properties for sale in the area. Now they're asking $30,000 an acre. I think that's all I have to say. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Dawson. Do we have any question to Mr. Dawson before we go to Mr. Smith? Councillor Harder, you have a question for Mr. Dawson?
Yes, I do. Well, actually, no, I'll hold off and ask of the of staff.
Okay,
Thank you, Mr. Dawson.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Dawson, and we'll go to Mr. Smith, Mr. Bert Smith. Mr. Smith, are you with us?
Yeah, it's under Margaret Smith. He's there, Chair.
So he's on mute. Can you unmute him, Mark? So
I can't. He has to do it himself, but
Mr. Smith, can you hit the button, mute, so you can unmute yourself? Mr. Smith, can you hear us?
I know if you can't get on to speak, I do know that the issue is similar in nature to Mr. Dawson in terms of a compensation issue through the Faulkner.
So maybe we'll go to Councillor Harder to ask staff. We have Dave Ryan, staff, to speak about the report, and then we'll keep trying to see if Mr. Smith, just so we will hear from him, just for our record. So Councillor Harder, if you have a question for Mr. Ryan, we have Dave Ryan.
Yeah, I was actually sending a text to Councillor Moffat, who knows more about drains than anybody that I know that's ever been on council. I didn't get a chance to because you're asking me. But I mean, is it our role, and I don't know this, is it our role to agree that this is a fair price, or are we dealing with, no, it's not. So Councillor Moffat saying not. And what is the process then that they would have to make that argument after we agree, if we agree or we disagree?
Why don't we turn to Mr. Ryan? Mr. Ryan?
Yeah, so the allowances are determined by the drainage engineer, and he's on the call as well, so he can explain further. But it's based on the impact assessment. It's not based on market value. So there is a formula that they use. This is the opportunity for the landowners to raise this issue. If they decide through the Drainage Act process that they disagree with the decision of committee or council, there are appeal processes available to them. But this is where these issues are to be raised. But if Mr. Robinson is on the line, I would ask him just to explain how he came up with these allowances. And just to explain, the allowances is for loss of any land or crops due to the construction or the improvement to the drain. The drain is a communal drain. It's not owned by the city. The farmers petitioned for it back in the day. It's their drain. There are improvements being made to the drain, the existing drain. But with that, I'll let Mr. Robinson explain further on how he came up with those assessments, allowances rather. And you there?
Robinson.
I'm here. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll explain the process we use or how we come up with this, but also I'll refer to a document that's a guide for engineers working under the Drainage Act, publication 852, which came out in late 2018. But basically, it captures what we have been doing, and essentially what it says about the value of allowances. The allowances must be fair to the property owners that receive them, but also fair to the other property owners in the watershed that are contributing to the payment of the allowances. So, as Mr. Ryan has indicated, we have used the impact property assessment values, well, literally in all the drains we do in Ottawa and Eastern Ontario, because it's something that is there, and from our point of view is defensible, and that we're not trying to create a number or pick a number that may or may not be different. Now, and in this case, what we have used is the impact value from March 2020, which was the most current at the time we did the report, so that we have used that throughout the area for all of the properties where there is land being taken. So I think it's I appreciate that the concerns of the landowners, and we don't have anything firmer in the impact or otherwise. I mean, there may be much land that's there that's people would sell if they get the right amount of money. And one of the things around Stittsville, and it does happen in other areas near urban areas, there is land that may have been sold in the past that's not classified by impact as farmland, which I'd consider might be speculative land because of the potential for development. But the bottom line is we've used the impact values. It's a standard practice we use. And in fact, in the same document I referred to it as one, it's not the only one, but it's definitely one of the recommendations that's made there, so that unless the committee was to give us specific directions with an amount to be used, there isn't much that we can do to change that. We think it's a fair approach and a defensible approach. And ultimately, we have to look at this, because if it does go to appeal, then we really, like everything else on the municipal drains, have to be in a position where we can defend the decisions that we have made.
Andy, Dave Ryan here again. Could you just highlight how much land we're talking about for these owners? How much land is affected by these improvements? It's an existing drain. I know there's some widening and a minor relocation, but can you just speak to that, the actual land that's being affected by this, please?
Yes, well, in the case of Mr. Smith, and I happen to have some documentation in front of me on that, it's about 0.9 hectares. And to put, again, the value that we have used is $17,225 per hectare. Again, that comes from impact, so that the value that will be paid to Mr. Smith is $15,502. Plus, there's some additional allowances for spreading of the material, which again, there's a method we use for that. Now, I'll come to the other property in a minute, but what we have done in this case of this drain is because it was kind of initiated as a result of development in the area, we have assigned a very small part of the total cost to the property owners, all of the property owners. And in the case of Mr. Smith's property, again, I happen to have it in front of me, I think his assessment after grants is about a little over $1,000. So that, and then in essence, what he will do is he'll get a payment of about $29,000 because of the fact that the amount being assessed to lands is fairly low. And I don't think that doesn't come into play on how much we think the allowance should be. We based it on the impact values. Now, in the case of Mr. Dawson, and I don't have the numbers here, his area that is involved is, I think it's 0.33 hectares. So it's again, it's not in the case of Mr. Dawson, because it's the drain goes through a very small part of his property. I think the total property is 1.85 hectares. So again, we've used the same formula as far as calculating how much his allowance is. And then in addition, he's also getting an allowance. We're not spreading the material on his property because it's the drain is being relocated off of the road allowance. And the reason it's being relocated off the road allowance is that in that area, the roadside ditch, which is also the municipal drain, is up to 3 meters deep, and it's a safety hazard. So again, because of the fact that there isn't a lot of charge back to the individual property owners, Mr. Dawson will get a fairly significant payment directly. Often the allowances go towards balancing off or reducing the amount of money that a landowner has to pay. But as I say, in this case, because most of the most of the cost is being charged to the city for the relocation and to the upstream development areas for the major part of the costs.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Robinson. And I think this process has been there for a good reason. We follow impact. But Councillor Harder, do you have any follow-up question, or you get the answer you're looking for?
Yes, I think it's about as clear as mud, but it's a lot clearer than it was before. Now it's only murky. Thank you.
I mean, okay. Again, the policy is to follow impact, and impact, that's how they value the land. I understand that dilemma, because the land is agriculture land and farmland, and valued separately if it land's going to be in the urban development. So that's, I think, the misunderstanding. Councillor Gower, you have a question before we go to Councillor Mohammed? And before we go to Councillor Gower, is Mr. Smith managed to come online?
Hello, yes. Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can. Go ahead, Bert. You have
Good
5
morning,
minutes to
and
address the committee.
thanks for the opportunity to talk here. My concerns are mainly same as Mr. Dawson's. This is not, I would say this is some prime #1 agriculture land that we're talking about. And in my calculations, they're going to take 4.2 acres of land from me. And that's something I can't replace. I can't buy at any price from local area, and land in here has been selling for around 20,000 an acre. We figure that that would be a number for us too, but we're not against just digging the original ditch out, deepen it. This land is, I think on the land map, it is Osgood loam, and it will, no matter whether you dig this ditch wider, it will still cut in, and we will lose more land as years go by. We have just got this ditch kind of settled and got good. The sides of it are sticking the way they should be, but there is one hang of a volume of water comes down there, and it comes at a very fast speed. Now, the last time it was dug out, I made them put some riprap up on the end of my north end of the farm near Stittsville, and a bit of a curve in it, as there is a bit of a curve in the road there too at Aikens and Shea. And there's got to be something done. If you dig this up again, it's got to be rip-wrapped with something, or some kind of hydro-seeded, or because I'm only guessing at this, but I'm sure that water is doing 10, 15 mile an hour when it's coming down there. It's moving because of the great grade that's on that ditch. It's as you get deeper and deeper, and in a terrific outlet at the creek, there is no holding it back. But I have never seen the ditch flood like onto our farmland or anybody else's around. It's doing quite an adequate job for the farmers. And I expect this petition was started by some of them rich guys in Stittsville that are building houses. And if they were to take 4.2 acres off their subdivision, would they be happy? This land will never be returned to us because the next generation has taken it over, my daughter and her husband. And if you want to figure it on 40 years of farming, that's a lot of food that's not going to be raised. And since this COVID is on us, it seems to be people are getting a little more interested in where their food comes from. And as I say, this is #1 ag land. This is not swamp. And so therefore, I think you should take it into consideration that we should be compensated better. And on top of that, the price of crops have gone right through the roof. This morning, the Chicago Board of Trade corn prices are $2.77 a ton, and we normally get 4.5 ton to the acre on this good land. And soybeans is $6.78 a ton, and you know, we get 1.5 tons, sometimes better. So if we're going to have this land tramped on and earth piled on it and the subsoil from down in the ditch piled up on top of what we're topsoil, what we're trying to grow our crops on, we need more compensation for that.
1 minute.
Pardon?
1 minute.
Oh, so I think I know you have formulas and things that you work this all on, but I think we better get into the real, join the real life here, because what I tell you is the truth. And I don't know how EPAC comes up with these numbers, but it's not this area at all. And therefore, I hope I've enlightened you a little on what the real world is, and thank you for your time, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Smith, and I'm glad we managed to get you back to speak. Any question for Mr. Smith before we go to the list? No? Okay, so the list is Vice Chair Goward and Councillor Moffitt and Councillor Meehan. Mr. Vice Chair.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Mr. Dawson and Mr. Smith, for your presentations. I have a question for staff. On page 3 of the report, there's a line that an assessment for special benefit is also assigned to the future development lands in block 17D. I'd like you to clarify, where is block 17D and what legal mechanism do you use to assign those special benefits? How does that work?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Andy, are you still there? Can you speak to your report on that, please?
Yes, I'm here, and I'd be happy to do so. Yes, I had my report open at the page where the cost estimates are, but I was looking at something else. But the majority of the cost, as I indicated, is there's a portion, the lower end, where we're relocating it on Mr. Dawson's land, that because it's being located to give a better, safer situation for the road, we've assigned that as a special benefit to the city. And
Andy, sorry, Andy, it's Mr. Smith. Mr. Smith's land is where the relocation's happening.
No, it's Mr. Dawson's.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, sorry. Go.
Sorry, that's okay. There is a presentation if we want to put it up later, but so in that regard, there's a special provision in the case of the lands that are being developed in Stittsville. I think there's 17A, B, and D, and then there's 20 E, F, and H if I have them, which are the 17s are south of Fernbank, the 20s are north of Fernbank. Is that we've assigned a special benefit of a significant part of the cost to them, and there is provision within the Drainage Act to do this. So it's not an uncommon thing where there's a benefit, a special benefit to particular properties, and to large extent this was initiated by the development that's taking place in the village, as well as the desire of the road authority to move the drain off the road. So that's it's a provision within the Drainage Act. Just for clarification, in Mr. Smith's case, is that the 0.9 hectares that is being allowed for basically payment for the use of the land, and not where it's being spread, works out to be about 2.2 acres.
I guess for clarity, what I'm asking is, we're assigning special benefit to future development lands in block 17D. Are these lands that are already in the urban boundary, or are they lands that are in the potential urban boundary discussion that we're having right now? What if these lands never develop? Does that mean the city would just never be paid back for that portion of this drainage work?
No, those lands are presently within the development area that was approved last time around.
Okay, thank you. That's what I'm looking for. Thank you.
I might just add also, although it doesn't have to, it's not a requirement because under the Drainage Act, we kind of do the assessment. But I think in most instances, the requirement to pay a portion of the cost is included within the subdivision agreements as well. So.
That it, Mr. Vice Chair?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Moffat?
Thank you. It's interesting. Mr. Smith is somewhat right. There's this all stems, the Faulkner Drain, the report that we have before stems from development in the Area 6 lands in Stittsville area. Interestingly enough, there's actually a stormwater pond that is not in the urban area. It was actually shifted outside the urban area into the rural area, which equates for just around 5 acres of land, so that it wasn't included in the urban area for development purposes. So the drain, that stormwater pond feeds into the Faulkner Drain, which then runs through and requires the upgrades to the system here. And this is common. Most of the drainage work we've been doing in at least the last 10 years have been updates due to the impact of development. And just in this area alone, Monaghan Drain, Arbuckle Drain, and the Van Gaal Drain have all stemmed from development activities. So in this case, one of the things, so in terms of cost, when we sit as Court of Revision, do have the ability to work within the assessments that are assigned through the schedules in the drainage report. Right now, what I would suggest, and this is, there's a couple things at play. One is the notification. So we, both Mr. Dawson and Mr. Smith, didn't get notified as quickly as we would have liked. With Canada Post challenges we've had, the notifications were sent out about 30 days ago, but they only just received them recently. So in a case like this, we would have preferred that they had the opportunity to speak with the engineer a bit more prior to today before coming to here. So one of the options that we have is actually taking these comments from both Mr. Dawson and Mr. Smith and then referring the report back to the engineer so that they can further evaluate this and actually have further discussions with both these landowners before the report then comes back to us. I think that would be wise in order to, not manage things on the fly here with this report, and then give the opportunity to both Mr. Dawson and Mr. Smith to further discuss this with the engineer, and then hopefully have we'll then have a better full picture of this when it comes back to us for a decision. And then should future concerns arise still, there are those appeal mechanisms in the Drainage Act process, which include Court of Revision, which is us, and then also through the Drainage Tribunal and referee if it came to that.
Okay. Thank you, Councillor Moffat. We'll go to Councillor Meehan, then we'll come back to the report. Councillor Meehan.
Thanks, Chair. I do like Councillor Moffat's suggestion on this. I don't think we should rush it. You talked about a tribunal, Councillor Moffat. Is there, if we were to permit this today, is there an appeals process? Is that the tribunal you were talking about?
Yes, there is I seen it, David Ryan, but under Section 57 of the Drainage Act, they will allow to come to the court provision for appeal. But what Councillor Moffat making reference to, since the two residents didn't get a proper notification, we should allow more time to go back to the engineer, Mr. Robinson, and hopefully they can come up with something. Otherwise, we'll come back to us with some recommendation for court provision or other. Am I correct, Mr. Ryan?
That's correct, Mr. Chair. Yes.
Okay.
Good.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Okay.
No, I think Councillor Moffat is right. I think in discussion with Mr. Ryan last evening, that would be the proper way to go forward. So we have a report. It reads that the committee recommends the council adopt. So we're gonna change that and we're gonna say. Mr. Ryan, how much time do you need to come back, or Mr. Robinson at this point, tell us how much time do you need to come back to us next ARAC meeting or maybe further down? I'm just trying, I don't want to put a pressure on and But
Yeah.
I'd like to give an opportunity for staff, engineers, and residents to work together.
So, Mr. Chair, we were anticipating that if it, excuse me, if it was referred back, that we would come back to committee in April.
In April? Okay, Mr. Dawson, Mr. Smith, I hope you're still there listening to us. So this report will come back in April. In the meantime, I think our staff will be in touch with you and Mr. Robinson, the engineer, on the report. So on a defer, okay, we can defer that.
So just to be clear, it's not a deferral. We have to, so a motion would have to be put forward to refer the report back to the drainage engineer.
Correct.
Okay.
And will come back to us in April. Presumably that's plenty of time for you, Mr. Robinson, or enough time for you?
Yes, it is. And now I appreciate in the case of Mr. Dawson that he literally just got this yesterday, so it's unfortunate. Now, in the case of Mr. Smith, we've had several discussions with him and has provided more information so that just to be clear. But the other thing is, Mr. Chairman, unless there's some direction from this committee to use a different way of evaluating the lands, I don't really see that we're going to be able to do very much in that regard, because again, we've used this standard impact information, so we'll look at it. Of course, I'm just sort of being upfront. I don't know that there's a lot of room without some additional direction from the committee.
Maybe the direction to our staff to tell us what's best practice. Like, I mean, we must have a best practice in the province. How other area in the province or other municipality, do they use impact or would they use market value? I mean, it's got to be some practice out there we can benefit from it. And I apologize, we didn't ask you folks if you need a presentation. I'm not sure if that would have helped, but I mean, staff did have presentation for today. But if we are waiting till April, maybe in April we'll do a presentation to put it in a little bit more context. But Mr. Ryan, is there's a best practice in the province about compensation? Can you bring us that up with your report in April? Tell us how other municipalities do best practice.
Absolutely, Chair. So Mr. Robinson alluded to it. There's a guide for engineers under the Drainage Act in the province, a provincial guide that gives them guidance on how to do these. And to Andy's earlier comments, it is based on the impact assessments. It's not speculative on market value, so it has to be based on something concrete. So they're based on the impact property assessment values.
Okay. Councillor Harder, I see you had your hand up.
Yeah, I'm confused. It sounds to me like there's a process in Ontario that's being followed here. I don't think that anything that we wait till April to come up with as a committee or as a council is going to change that, unless there is an opportunity, gentlemen being the gentlemen that actually are being paid by the city, not the gentlemen who are farming the land. For the two of you, the system we follow, is it the system that Ontario dictates? I mean, aside from the MPAC, I mean, I get what our farmers are saying. I mean, their land is likely worth a lot more than MPAC. That's an unfortunate and painful fact that MPAC, while it's better than it used to be, and it's working faster than they used to be. But for example, Mr. Chair, with the BIAs, that's an example. All the new businesses that we have here in Barrhaven, not many of them are giving us, are contributing to our tax base, and that because MPAC hasn't added to it. So they will, and we'll catch up with it. You know what I'm saying? So obviously the MPAC would definitely not have caught up with the increase in the affordability of land in our city. We hear that from everybody, how we've run we don't have affordability anywhere in the city. And we heard that as recently as from Jason McDonald last week at our joint committee. So I don't, unless they can tell me or tell all of us that there's an opportunity for us as an individual city to change that, I think maybe a direction might be better and allow the gentleman to do what they want to do, which is go to the appeal process. So can we do either of you know that for a fact?
Well, first of all, I think we need to defer this item because one of the gentlemen didn't notice about this meeting till yesterday, and under Section 57 of the Drainage Act, they should have been notified before. Now, for whatever reason, Canada Post or other, they were not notified. But I think that, on the process itself, obviously, Mr. Robinson followed the process been set up by the guide. But if any changes, the municipality can make their own changes. But I don't think we are able to do changes right now on the fly, regardless. So I think we still should wait, and we should hear more from our staff what other municipality use for best practice. Councilor Moffitt.
Thank you, Chair. I didn't know that piece of information, so I appreciate it. Thanks.
Councilor Moffitt.
Thanks. I would simply add that I know there's some concerns or discrepancy between the market value and the impact value. One thing of consideration that probably wouldn't have been an issue here today had it not been for COVID is that the impact assessments that we're dealing with are from 2016. They're quite outdated. That was supposed to get reviewed and completed in 2020, but was pushed off to 2021. So we're dealing with 5-year-old assessments, and that's not the norm in this province, is to have assessments that old. Normally these would have been updated by now, and we'd be working on updated assessments. So if we could, it is possible that we could talk in the meantime with MPAC, see if they have some information that could be pertinent to this discussion, that could give us a bit more direction on how we could properly assess these lands. I get the challenge with market value, but I think there is something that we should do, because the discrepancy between market value and the assessment of these lands is quite severe. And that's after 2016 had a massive increase in assessed value of farmland over the 2012 assessed value.
So that's the more reason we shouldn't make a decision today, and we should wait and see if we can find more, even if reach out to MPAC and do site visit or something. So another good reason why we should defer this item till April meeting. And Mr. Ryan, you keep us posted. Even if you need to take a little bit more time into May, I think we should be able to give you a space to try to give us as much information. And maybe next time you give us a presentation, because I feel we missed on the presentation. Could have helped us to understand better.
Yeah, that's certainly, Mr. Chair. There is a presentation prepared currently, but yeah, I'd certainly be updated for the next time we come to ARAC.
Okay.
Chair, there is a motion ready to defer if you wish to have it up.
Okay, so Mr. Vice Chair, can you see it, or do you want me to read it?
I'd be happy to read it. Therefore, be it resolved that the Agriculture and Rural Affairs Committee refer the report back to the drainage engineer under Section 57 of the Drainage Act for reconsideration in response to landowner comments, and report back to the April ARAC meeting.
Okay. On the motion?
Carried.
Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Robinson and Mr. Ryan for helping on, and Mr. Dawson and Mr. Smith. Thank you both for attending today's committee meeting. With that, now we go to, we have open mic session, and we have 2 people signed up to the open mic session. Since we haven't had an open mic for quite some time, we can just open mic, we can just hear what our residents have to say without any comment or any back and forth. So the first person is Mr. Ken Holm, Ottawa Official Plan, Rural Lands, and he has a power presentation. So Mr. Holm, I hope you're still with us, and you have 5 minutes to address the committee through open mic session. See Mr. Holm on the screen. Mr. Holm, you're on mute. You need to unmute yourself. There you are.
Okay.
Now we can hear you loud and clear.
Thank you. Are we ready? No. Are we ready to start?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. My name is Ken Holmes, and I'm one of the 2 rural members of the city's official plan ambassadors working group. We help engage the rural community in the development of the plan. Next slide, please. The official plan is supposed to guide growth and manage change to 2046. Rural transportation and the internet are 2 areas of major deficiency in the current plan. Unfortunately, the current draft plan fails to provide guidance in both transportation and the internet. Next slide. Yep. No, sorry, back. There we. No, sorry, back. My error. Back 1. There we go. No, back 1. That's it. Thank you. This quotation might have given optimism that the plan would address these deficiencies, but any optimism is soon dashed when the plan itself is studied. For rural internet, that one sentence is the single appearance of the word internet amongst 264 pages. For rural transportation, the draft plan lacks vision and direction. Next slide. Looking first at transportation, an overarching goal of the plan is to have half of all trips made by sustainable transportation. That's a very aspirational goal, and aspirational goals are what we need in a plan that has a 30-year vision. Unfortunately, the plan fails to recognize the special challenges that this big move faces in our rural areas. There's a need for transportation options in rural Ottawa. We talk a lot about this deficiency, but it's a little advance in planning since amalgamation. Next slide. Thank you. There is significant and growing interest among residents in finding some solutions. A recent example is a survey conducted by the Huntley Community Association. That survey focused on the needs of carp and drew responses from some 240 residents across all age groups. Another study is being undertaken by a community-based group, the Rural Transportation Solutions for Ottawa. They're working to engage residents across rural Ottawa and will be seeking councillors' input to a survey, as well as help engaging our rural residents. Their website will go live shortly, and they'll be launching their survey this month. Next slide, please. The top 2 lines are from a what we plan to achieve box in the plan. This suggests that planners would be considering the need for transportation options, that they merely state to recognize mobility options within the rural area. Recognizing options does not lead to policy and planning. The rest of the plan does not even follow through with this what we want to achieve statement. Direction on transportation solutions becomes even more elusive with the wording at the bottom of the slide, where it says that the use of personal vehicles is the most prevalent means of transportation within and to and from the rural area. That's simply a statement of the status quo. It's a telling illustration of the lack of vision for rural transportation. Next slide. The official plan is guilty of a common fault that CUTA identifies, where transportation planners focus on managing their transportation system and not solving transportation problems.
1 minute.
This paradigm has been evident for the rural area since amalgamation. If the official plan is to shape the future, it must include a bold statement on where we want to progress in the rural area. Next slide, please. Moving to the internet, the avoidance of this problem area is evident by this sentence being the solitary appearance of the word internet in this entire plan. Nowhere else is there even mention of how the shortfall in internet capacity affects rural residents across all areas of quality of life and business. Next slide. I don't think the city has had a plan for resolving our internet problem since the 2007 partnership with ExploreNet. According to a press release at the time, this project would provide 100% rural broadband coverage to rural residents and business. Now, more than a decade later, the Ottawa Neighborhood Equity Index reports that rural internet speeds are on average 1/10 of that of urban speeds. Next slide, please.
Thank you, Mr. Holm. No, we have to cut it at this point, Mr. Holm. You've been over your time, but thank you very much for your presentation. And I hope you heard my presentation earlier about rural broadband. But thank you for taking the time to address the committee. Our next guest for open mic session is Peter Hume and Peter Osmans. I hope I said it right. Also, they have a PowerPoint presentation. So, Mr. Hume, are you on? Oh, here you are.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of committee. I was very interested in the AMO presentation. As the former president of the group, it's heartening to see that it's still making inroads in and bringing up issues that are important to everyone in Ontario. I don't know if Mr. Husman is with us. He had a medical issue that he had to deal with, so he might not be on the line with us. But he and I are here to seek some clarity from you on the policy, on your policy intent with respect to farm retirement lots. We've come up against an issue that we think is nuanced, and that that your intent, we need to understand what your intent as policy setters was in the case that we're going to show you here. This is the area outlined in red. If you can see the large square, is a farm on Frank Kenny Road. It's 4431 and 4439 Frank Kenny Road, and it's the Dugas family farm. And you may know the Dugas family. They're long-standing residents in the Navan area. I think the city even named a park after them. In 1985, the farm was established, and in 1985, 2 homes were built on the farm property. A house for Mr. and Mrs. Dugas, and a house for their son, Robert. In 2016, the farm was sold. The Dugas family retired from farming, and it was bought by Peter Husman. And you can see the red H's that I'm showing you are the Husman farm properties. The main farm is at the top along Husman Road. They also own the farm property immediately to the south of the subject property. So all good. Farm sold. Dugases are retiring, but part of the agreement was that the Dugas family could retain the 2 family homes that were on the property. All good, seems reasonable. Unfortunately, the city's official plan policy really expects in a farm where there are 2 houses on farm properties, one to be permanent and one to be temporary. And so when you look at the policy and you apply it, the city's policy expects that the city staff interprets the farm retirement policy as we're going to remove that temporary home. And you can see it in this official plan. It's even clearer in the new official plan that 2 houses on a farm property, one of them is temporary and has to go. Unfortunately, what we find ourselves here is with the situation where you actually have 2 permanent houses on the property, and we can show them on the next 2 slides. So, oh no, sorry, this is a slide from 1991, just to give you some perspective how little the farm has changed. So that's the farm in 1991. I showed you it was established in 1985. The two houses were built, and there's 2017. So very, very similar. So in all that time, none of the properties have really changed. The property at the top of the picture is the homestead, and the house at the bottom is Robert Dugas's family home, who he lives in. So if you go to the next one. So the problem we ran into is, here are the two houses, if you can just run through them quickly. The problem we ran into is in trying to create two properties for the Dugas family, we run afoul of the temporary nature of the home. And the only way to achieve a farm retirement on this property is to have one of those permanent homes demolished. And in fact, the city staff were very clear, and this is the way they're interpreting the policy. They indicated that if Robert Dugas moved from where he lives and where he's lived since 1985 into the Dugas family home at 4431, and then we demolished 4439, we would be able to achieve we would be able to put the house at 4431 into Robert's name, and he would be able to have title to that property.
That's time.
So, Mr. Chair, my last thing I will say to the committee is what we're looking for. We don't really believe that the city policy encompasses two existing homes. And so what we're asking the committee to do, or to hear us, is to ask staff to bring back a report with options on resolving the unique problems like this without having to tear down one of the.
Thank you, Mr. Hume, for your presentation. And obviously, we're not going to comment on this. We'll leave that. We can ask staff after, especially on the policy side. So thank you, Mr. Hume, and thank you, Mr. Hume, for your presentation, both of you. Any inquiries from our colleagues? Councillor Moffitt? Councillor Moffitt, we're not commenting on a presentation, are we?
Well, in normal circumstance, what we can do with the open mic sessions is that we can ask for information from staff.
We can ask staff after to give us, some of our staff on the call, they heard the presentation, they can report to us later on. But in the meantime, we just heard the presentation. I think that's how we did in the mid-governing about the open mic. We just listen, and if there's anything take away, we'll come back with staff after.
Okay.
Am I correct, Chris? Do I have legal on the call? Ms. Inta?
That is correct, Chair. I believe, for your information, Mr. Chair, the property that was just spoken about was at the Committee of Adjustment, and the Committee of Adjustment adjudicated on it. And the city is now a party to an appeal in front of the LPAT. So just for your information.
And that's for an extra reason not to touch something. It's going to be in the front of another. We don't have jurisdiction over Committee of Adjustments, so we're not going to comment on it. But as far as policy, I think we can have discussion with our staff because we have OP right now we're working on. If we need some clarity on a policy issue, we can check with staff after. But thank you, Ms. Inta.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so any inquiries or other business? So before we adjourn, this is I believe, if Councillor support committee recommendation, that would be last meeting for Councillor Gower be a vice chair of Iraq. I know Councillor Gower staying on Iraq, and we thank him for that. But I just want to say on behalf of the committee and staff, thank you, Mr. Vice Chair, for your support, and looking forward working with the new Vice Chair in the next couple of years. So with that, I want to say thank you, Councillor Gower, and we really appreciate your support and also staying on Iraq. That's very important to us. Thank you. I'm not sure if you want to say something before we adjourn.
Well, it's been a long meeting. My daughters are daring me to sing One Last Time from the Hamilton soundtrack, but I will not do that. Thank you for your words, Mr. Chair, and it's been a good learning experience about rural affairs, drains, ditches, severances, and agriculture, internet, everything else that makes up the diverse world of our rural area in Ottawa. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, folks. Our next meeting will be Thursday, March 4th, 2021. Thank you very much and have a great day. We are adjourned.